Kind of weird. Isn't it working? Oh, okay. I should warn you that next week it's not at all clear that I'll be able to do the Medrash Shiur because Wednesday night there is a family wedding, and these weddings end at all kinds of weird hours in the morning, and I'm not sure what condition I'll be in, so stay tuned for this breaking news in the I'll read you extracts from the Medrash, which is in front of you. The one that starts with Chaf Aleph. I mean, it came out very weird. The one that starts with Chaf Aleph. It starts out, this week's parsha, we have Achedesh Hazeh Lochem, Reish Chodoshim. Can you hear? This month will be the first of all the months. So he quotes a pasuk in Yeshaya, Harishenis Nivo, Chadosh Ani Magid, that there are new things coming. So the Medrash asks, V'chiyesh lo sidlo v'chadosha, is it possible that there are going to be new things in the world? V'aksiv mashahoya hu sheyeh, we have a pasuk in Kelos, that which was, that is, it's that which shall be. Ela, moitzi nanu asara devorei mosei HaKadosh Baruch Hu l'chadish lo sidlo, we find that Rabbi Michel is going to introduce 10 new things in the future. So it seems that really this is a contradiction. The Mefarshim over here explained that in this world as we know it, there will not be anything new, but Rabbi Michel is going to create a new world with new heavens and a new earth, and it's going to be an entirely new Bria. In that new Bria, there are going to be 10 very significant new changes. The first one I'll read you quickly because I'm really going to focus on the last three. The first is that Rabbi Michel is going to cause the sun to be illuminated manifold times, and it's going to heal. It's going to heal the sick. The second one is that he's going to bring out living waters from Yerushalayim, and they are going to heal all the sicknesses. The third is that the trees, it's not there, I'll get to the other ones over there. The third is that the trees are going to bear fruit every single month, and people will eat them and will be healed by them. The fourth is that all of the cities that were destroyed and or desolate will be rebuilt, even Sodom and Amorah. The fifth is that he will rebuild Yerushalayim with precious stones, sapphire stones. Yerushalayim will be built out of sapphire stones. And they bring psukim for all of these things. The sixth is that all of the animals will live in peace. All the wild and predatory animals will live peacefully with the animals that they used to feed on. The seventh is that there will be a covenant with all of the animals and all of the fowl and all of the creeping creatures. Rabbi Michel will strike a covenant with them, ostensibly that they will be at peace with man. And finally, now here's where the second paper comes in. The eighth, she'ein oid b'chi v'yalala ba'elam. There will no longer be any weeping or wailing in the world. She'nema v'layishama ba'oid kel b'chi v'kel zaka, because the Navi says there will not be heard anymore the sound of weeping and the sound of Zaka, which apparently the Medrash is using to represent wailing. Hachis, the ninth chidush, will be Einaid Mavis Be'elam. There will no longer be any death in the world, as it's written in Yeshaya, Bila Mavis Lanetzach. Death will be eradicated forever. The Rebbeinu Shalom will wipe tears from off of every face, v'chepas amo yosir, and the shame of his nation he will take away. Hoasiris, the 10th chidush is she'enoid lo yanocha, lo yanoko, v'lo yogain. There will no longer be any krechtzing. I don't know how to translate anocha. Anocha is a krechts. So you can, it's an onomatopoeia. A krechts is a, that's a krechts. That's a anocha. You know, a person's heart is heavy. They're walking around with all kinds of stress and all kinds of worry, and they sigh. It's a sigh. There won't be any more sighing, and no screaming, v'lo yogain, and no sadness. Ela kol smechim, everybody will be happy. Shenemar v'duya Hashem yeshuvun v'yitzin b'rina, that those people who will be redeemed by Hashem will return, and they will come to Tzion with rina, with song, with ebullience, something like that. So that's the Medrash. So these last three things are interesting. There's not going to be any crying or any wailing, no death, and Hashem will wipe away all the tears, and there will not be any sighing or any sadness. So it just seems to me that these last three are very, very similar to one another. And what's the difference between number 8 and number 10? And even number 9, which is the removal of death from the world, would also seem to be almost accounted for by number 8. If there's not going to be any more crying, so you would have to assume that there would not be any death, because if there would be death, then there would be crying. So it just seems that these are all somewhat redundant. And yet, the Medrash wants us to understand that they are all distinct chidushim. Each one is a chidush for itself. So I would like to suggest that there is really a difference in all of these. And that each one represents kind of a different way that, or a different direction that we're looking. So one of the things that we have found, and this is kind of across the board. It doesn't matter whether we're talking about people who are from birth, or we're talking about people who are Bali Tshuva. People sometimes find it impossible to forgive themselves for their past mistakes. It may be past moral indiscretions, it may be past averas that they did in ignorance, it may be past mistakes that they made because they ignored good advice, and there's a certain tendency to kind of never get past the to never get past that sadness. And people go back to it time and again. And they're walking around with a hammer, and they're constantly hitting themselves in the head. You know, how could I do this? And why did I do this? And it's, you know, the part of them never really escapes the past. The Rambam in Hilchos Tshuva says that it's permissible and perhaps even advisable that the sins that a person confessed to in a previous Yom Kippurim, that he should repeat them on successive Yom Kippurs. Now that is a contested opinion in Shas, and there is an opinion that one should not be allowed to do that it's considered kekelev hashav al kiyah. It's like a dog who comes back to his vomit. So why would a person who has already done tshuva on something go back to something that he's already taken care of? Nonetheless, the Rambam finds that it is something which is advisable. So the Mefarshim say that both of these opinions in the Gemara represent different kinds of attitudes towards indiscretions. That some people do things of which they learn later on, or they maybe should have known better in the first place, but they sober up later on and they realize that they've made some very, very serious mistakes, perhaps mistakes that they can't repair. But the bottom line is that they have genuine remorse, they know how not to repeat that mistake, and they want to move on into the future. So they go through the process of vidui and tshuva. And comes Yom Kippurim, they do all the things. They say al chet and hashamnu, they do all the right things. And they reflect on what they've done and believe that they understand it, and to the best of their ability they feel badly about it. But the truth is that any person who is a growing spiritual individual, as he moves upwards and as his sensitivities grow, he has greater regret for what he did because he's looking at it from a much higher perspective, and he has a much deeper appreciation of how wrong something was. The greater a person is, the greater is going to be the person's embarrassment and his remorse for having done something which was a violation of Hashem's ratzon. So if, in fact, a person is growing in their sense of understanding, going deeper into how it happened and why it happened, and their remorse is deeper, then they're not confessing to the same sin the next Yom Kippur as they did the previous Yom Kippur. It's a completely different place, and it's a completely different tshuva. That, the Gemara would argue, is something that person should do, and that's what the Rambam is advocating. Grow in your tshuva and repeat it another Yom Kippur, because in the next Yom Kippur you will have a much more sensitive appreciation of what your mistakes were. The other opinion of the Gemara is saying, if it's the same, if you're doing the same old tshuva and you haven't grown, then what's the point? You're just going back to the old, as it were, kekelev hashav al kiyah. You're going back to the same old vomit. There's no purpose in that. So there are people who are burdened by their past. And here is a really important place for us to understand. If someone has done tshuva, and they've done tshuva to the best of their ability, and they continue to beat themselves up for it, to a certain extent, there is a kfirah here. There is a renunciation of a divine gift. The Rabbi Michel said, I'm offering you an eraser, and I accept tshuva. And not only do I accept tshuva, but zedonos nasan lekishkogos, even deliberate and intentional sins are taken down a step. And if you do tshuva miyahava, then it's completely erased. It becomes zachias, it becomes mitzvahs. But the point of here is that tshuva works. The Rambam says even if a person has been a rasha kol yomov, he's been a rasha all of his life, and at the end he does tshuva at the last minute in his life, And when he comes up before the Bezin Shalmaila, he will not be held accountable for anything. We have to assume that that last minute of tshuva was sincere. But the point over here is that if a person is constantly walking around with this heaviness because of something that they've done, despite the fact they've done tshuva, there's something wrong with this picture. And that's not the kind of tshuva that the Rambam is advocating. The Rambam is saying, do tshuva, grow in your tshuva. And then the Rambam, in a certain sense, is advocating a completely different quality of tshuva, which is do something with your tshuva. Repair the things you can repair. Allow the things that that life and your mistakes have taught you, so that in the future you'll be forewarned, forearmed. Your past mistakes will be instructive in terms of your future, so that someone who has a genuine and sincere appreciation of what it means to live Jewishly and in a Torah perspective has to be able to let go. Now, for example, there's this famous case of Rabbi Goyen. Rabbi Goyen was once found weeping by one of his disciples. So his Talmud couldn't understand, what would he be weeping about? Rabbi Goyen was such a massive tzaddik. He never did any Aveira, so what is he crying about? So he asked Rabbi Goyen, like, why is the Rebbe weeping? So he said to him, surely you're not weeping for something that you did. So he said, I'll tell you why I'm weeping. He said, I once came to a town where I was slated to give a drasha. I arrived the evening before I was supposed to deliver the drasha the next day, and I came into an inn. I was covered with dust from the traveling. I didn't look like much. The innkeeper saw what he thought to be just another traveler, and when I asked him for a room, he tossed me a key and said, take the room down the hall. The next day, the innkeeper came out. The streets were abandoned. So he went back and looked at the calendar. He couldn't understand why everybody was not in the marketplace. He thought maybe there was some yontif that he didn't know about. Maybe it was a fast day that he forgot about. Nothing on the calendar. So he stopped someone who was running in the direction of the shul. He said, where's everybody? They said, well, they went to the synagogue because Rabbi Goyen is here and he's going to deliver a lecture. So the innkeeper ran to the shul and he looked up front, and there was yesterday's traveler whom he treated so shabbily. So at the conclusion of the shiur, this innkeeper ran up to the front, threw himself at Rabbi Goyen's feet, and wept, Rebbe, please forgive me. If only I'd known yesterday what I know today, I would have treated you differently. So Rabbi Goyen said, I feel the same way in my relationship with Hashem. Every day, he said, I have a deeper appreciation for the Rebbeinu Shalom. So today I weep because if only I'd known yesterday what I know today, I would have, my service to Hashem would have been so much more fervent, so much deeper. So we have the right to lament the fact that our past has not allowed us the background so that today we would be so much further ahead had we not made some of the mistakes that we made in the past. But not because our past makes us unworthy, and not because our past makes us unloved by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Quite the contrary. Someone who's about tshuva, the Rambam says, that he is Yedid Hashem, and he's beloved, and he's Hashem's closest friend, and Hashem has such nachas from the Baal Tshuva, more so than he has from Tzadikim Gemurim, as the Gemara says in Brachas. So this is a very, very fine kind of a thing where all of us, I believe all of us carry around a little peckle. And that little peckle is a certain feeling of, I feel badly about the fact that I didn't make the most of the opportunities that I have. But I'm joyful and I'm grateful that my slate is clean, that my past is not being held against me, and it's not obstructing my present or my future. So there's a certain sadness, and whenever Rosh Hashanah comes, the shofar is an expression of our sadness. It weeps. It weeps not because we are unworthy, but it weeps because we have made what we, as human beings do, we make mistakes. So we weep for our mistakes. Not because the Rebbeinu Shalom dislikes us or rejects us for our mistakes, but simply because our mistakes have, in a certain sense, prevented us from being as far along as we might be in our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That will be until the time of Mashiach. But when Mashiach comes, he will introduce a whole new world. It's no longer going to be a world in which there'll be any question about how far or how deep our tshuva has penetrated. And in the time of Mashiach, when everything will be, when we will see things with the clarity of Aspaklaw Yamir, everything will be so translucent and so clear. And we will look into, with the full benefit of truth, we will be able to look into our neshamas and do the kind of tshuva which will be a tshuva me'ahav, and all of the past indiscretions will in fact become zachiyos. At that point, the shofar weeping, which is an expression of our weeping every year for what our mistakes represent for us, will no longer be relevant. Because there will no longer be any such obstacles, there will no longer be any such obstructions from the past in our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So there will be something new, and that something new will be the eradication of bechi, of the crying, of the true of the shofar and the true of our hearts, and the wailing. All of that about our past will no longer be relevant, because in the time of Mashiach, all of that will have been restored in such a way that the past will have been transformed into all kinds of positive things. So that is a big chidush in the new world. The crying and the wailing about the past. And then the new world will be a world without death. One of the sources of our sadness in all of our lives is the fact that the way in which we spend our time is either in things that are what we will call temporal, things which are ephemeral, things that are, here's a better word, moribund. Things that are moribund, things that die. And almost everything that we do, everything that we touch, we go to work, we eat, we sleep, we play, we do business, we socialize. Almost everything we do is moribund. It doesn't have to be moribund, but it could be. And in some of the harsher svarim, they would argue that it's even possible for us to turn our Torah and mitzvahs into things that are more abundant. If we do them arrogantly, if we do them selfishly, if we do them hurtfully. There was someone who read in a sefer that if somebody doesn't talk Dvarim B'Telim for 40 days, that he will be Zeicha to Gilui Eliyahu. So he decided he wanted to see Eliyahu Hanavi, and he was very disciplined, and for 40 days he did not say any Dvarim B'Telim. At the end of 40 days, Eliyahu Hanavi did not appear. So he went to see, I don't remember who it was, either the Baal Shem Tov, or he went to see the Rabbi Rabbinim, one of the great tzaddikim, and the tzaddik said to him, "You really didn't say any Dvarim B'Telim during those 40 days?" He said, "But did you daven?" "Yeah, of course I davened." "Did you say Tehillim?" "Yeah, of course I told him." He said, "Well, those were your Dvarim B'Telim." Because the way in which he davened and the way in which he said Tehillim was without any neshama. In any event, the point over here, there is a certain sadness in our lives because when we aren't, the Rambam again says, it's possible for a person to eat, and it should be part of his Avodas Hashem if a person is conscious of the fact that when he eats, that he is eating because he wants to be able to have the energy to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to be strong. If he sleeps, because he wants to be rested so he can serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. If he does business, it's because he wants to be able to feed his family, which is a form of Gemilos Chasadim and Tzedakah, because he wants to be able to pay Schar Limud, he wants to be able to pay tuition in school, he wants to be able to contribute to the mikveh and to the Chevra Kaddish, he wants to be able to contribute to the yeshivas and to the... Everything a person does can be. It's not that anything can't be connected. Everything can be connected. But it takes a few seconds of consciousness. Why am I doing this? A person should always ask himself, why am I doing what I'm doing? Before he sits down to eat, to drink, to do anything. Why am I doing this? And to be able to say, I am doing this in order to be able to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu better. That takes everything he does and turns it into a nitzchius. It makes it part of his avodah. But we're not real good at that, and it gets away from us because that kind of awareness, that kind of consciousness, there are great people who can do it 24 hours a day, but most of us will be happy if we can do it sometimes during the day. And that's a consciousness that we can cultivate, but and increase it over time. But the bottom line is that at the end of every day, there's the Zohar Kodesh, very interesting Zohar. The Zohar Kodesh says that every day comes to a person, the day itself. When a person wakes up in the morning, the day, almost like a day has a life, the day comes to the person and says, give me life, breathe life into me today. So that that time, in a certain sense, has a personality. It has some kind of a existence, and we, by what we do with time, invest it with life, or God forbid, we empty it. So there's an expression in English, you're killing time. We do kill time. If we're not sublimating time, if we're not capturing time for Avodas Hashem, then it's time that's morbid. It's time that's going to die because it has no life. So there is a certain sadness that we have in the present. I'm not talking about, of course there's sadness when people that we love pass on, but we have an ongoing, in a certain sense, an ongoing relationship with death, with the things that we do when they're not God-conscious activities. Those are things that are moribund. They die. And inasmuch as we know that they die, there's a certain sadness about the fact that parts of our lives are in a currency of death. We're not depositing them in our eternal account. So when Mashiach comes, that God consciousness will be something that will be with us on a constant basis. So that's the ninth chidush. The ninth chidush is that when Mashiach comes, there will be a new world, and in that new world, there's not going to be any death. Not just that there won't be any physical death, that too, but there won't be any death in the way in which our lives are conducted. Our lives will be vibrant, they will be vital, they'll be full of all kinds of living eternal energy, because it will all be connected with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Then there's a certain sadness that we have when we struggle with our potential. Many of us, perhaps all of us, are aware that we can do better in everything. We know that we have certain gifts, we know that we have certain contributions that we could make, but we are busy. And our busyness gets in our way, and it makes it difficult for us to realize our potential. But our potential never lets up. So there's this constant thing inside us that says, let me out of here. It's like something that's in prison, and saying, let me out. I want to do something in the world. I want to make a difference in the world, and I can make it. I can draw better. I can sing better. I can talk better. I can teach better. I can empathize better. There's so many things that we can all do better, and we don't get to doing the things better. And one day chases the next, and here we are. We're 50, 60, 70, 80 years old, and we're still chasing the same things that we chased a long time ago. It's very humbling. I was cleaning out a drawer recently, and I found a piece of paper on which I had written some of the things I wanted to do. And they were very much the same things that I would have written had I just written it yesterday. They were looking at something that I wrote 10 years ago or 20 years ago, and still haven't done them. So there's something that comes between us and our potential, and it's frustrating. And the pasuk that relates to that is, there will come a time in which there will be no sadness and no sighing. And that's talking about the kind of thing that comes between us and when Mashiach comes, that's not going to be possible. Mashiach will motivate us. Mashiach will see to it that all of our gifts are manifested, that they're all actualized. We will flower, we will prosper, because in Mashiach's time He will move us to become who we're supposed to become. But that's part of the new world. But in our world, there is that ongoing sense of frustration that I believe everybody has when they deal with what they are, with what they could be. So we now have to deal with, so what can we do today? All right, so this is not the time of Mashiach. So how can we wail less, and how can we be less sad, and how can we be zeichet to Tzion Barina today? How can we come to greater joy? So I think that we pretty much touched upon it. We need to develop a greater consciousness for the fact that the Rebbeinu Shalom is pleased with our tshuva, that He rejoices with our tshuva. We need to accept the fact that our slate is clean from those past mistakes, and if anything, that now is an opportunity for us to convert those mistakes into assets by having learned from them and by turning them into the zachias if we work on doing tshuva me'ahava. So we need to, when we find ourselves kind of ruminating about going back to the past, we need to stop ourselves, especially if we're beating ourselves up about it, and say, the Rebbeinu Shalom is happy with us, then why am I not letting go? And am I doing the best I can with having learned from my past mistakes so that they become an asset to my future? In the present, we need to slowly work on this, developing and cultivating this this God consciousness. Talk to God during the course of the day. Talk to him in English, talk to him in Ivrit, whatever language you want to talk to him about. But make him a member of the family. When you burn the toast, Hashem, I just burnt the toast. And, so what should I do about that? And what does this mean? But just, kind of connect with him as though he were no stranger. When Hashem's a stranger, we can't take the moribund and make it eternal unless we're thinking about it, how we can integrate everything that we're doing. And everything can be integrated. I once did this experiment with a group of people. I said to them, here's a piece of paper, and I put columns on a piece of paper. I said, here are markers, red markers, green markers, yellow markers. Put in the course of the day, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, learn about color. Color, spiritual times, color times that are not spiritual, color times that are entertaining. So let's say if yellow was spiritual, during the course of the week, there was very little yellow. Davening time was yellow. That was yellow. And if they had a shiur, that was yellow. Nothing else was yellow. So I said to them, okay, somebody calls you up and says to you that there's an orphan and there's a little infant and nobody's got to, would you volunteer to care for this orphan for a few hours once a week? You would do it, right? So what color is that? Well, that's yellow, that's for sure. I said to them, why, if you spend some time with your own infant, why is that any less of a gemilas chesed? Just because you love him, does that make it less of a kindness, an act of kindness? If somebody calls you and says, Moshe, do me a favor, the floor in the shul needs to be mopped up. So you think you could do it this week? So you do it. You did a favor for the shul. Is that spiritual? Yeah, well, that's a good deed. That's a mitzvah. So if you do something in your own home for Shabbos and you clean the floor for Shabbos, it's not a mitzvah. I mean, the point is we can take almost anything. You just have to think about it in the right way, and you've managed to integrate it into Avodas Hashem. So we need to develop that. We need to cultivate that. And in terms of the future, we need to be able to cultivate the kind of joy that comes from slowly developing our potential. And that doesn't happen without a plan. So we don't have time. The problem is we don't take time to plan. If we were to take out a little bit of time and think about how we want to achieve some of the things that are important to us in the future, and how you get from point A to point B to point C, and then finally to point Z, and we could do that with a timeline, we would discover that there is something exciting happening in our lives because we are moving towards our future, and we're developing our potential. So whether it's the new world, the 8th chidush of the world, or the 9th chidush of the world, or the 10th chidush of the world, we can't have them in their perfect expression right now. They will happen in Mir Hashem B'Korib when Mashiach comes, but we can do a little bit to be our own Mashiach. And we can see to it that we can restore our joy, throw away the peckle that we're dragging around and wallowing in our past mistakes, and invest in the power of tshuva and recognize that the Rebbeinu Shalom is pleased with us, and then learn from our mistakes. We can make more of our present, not more abundant. We can get rid of as much death in our lives as we possibly can, and in moving into the future, we can work slowly on having some real plan about how we're going to develop one of the things that is important to us about our potential. And it can be almost anything. And if we do something about our potential, we'll discover that that we're coming to our own tzion, to our own kedusha with a very special joy. So we should be zeicher Yetz Hashem to do our own Mashiach, and thereby we will be zeicher to the Yetz Hashem, the Kol Mamish, to the Bias Geil Tzedek, and the Binyan Beis HaMikdash Mimhir Yamin.